I don't want to run the world. The Constitution doesn't give me the authority to run the world. We ought to mind our own business is what we need to
do. Welcome to Voices of Reason, Iowa's premier liberty podcast.
Find us online at voicesofreason.org or facebook.com/Taste of Liberty.
We hope you enjoy the show, everybody, so stay tuned.
I remember black skies, the lightning all around me.
Well, welcome to episode 38 of Voices of Reason. I'm Gabe Lands.
I'm Dusty Jewell.
And I'm Tony Seliquini.
That's right. We have all three Stooges in the house tonight, and we've got a pretty thought-provoking episode ready for you all. And in fact, right now you can probably guess what we're talking about.
Yeah, we want to give a special shout-out to all of the NSA agents that are listening in tonight.
Yep, I left my cell phone at home tonight. Just didn't want to just make sure that nobody is listening into this episode before we release it to our own listeners. That way, they don't have a leg up on anybody.
Mine's in my truck.
Somebody must be listening to us because I think Adam Kokesh was even talking about some of the stuff from our last episode.
Yeah, we put it out before you did.
Yeah, actually, at the end of episode 37, which I hope you did listen to because I feel that it was one of our most important episodes, we ended up going back to the past 36 episodes before that, and we time and time again, all of our predictions have come true.
Well, actually, when we get into discussion later tonight, we'll actually talk about a few things that we've covered previously in episodes that are almost directly tied to what's going on right now with this Edward Snowden and all this junk with the NSA.
Yes, sir.
But before we do that, we have a few things to cover first, so let's get into our announcements.
First couple of announcements relate to a couple of past events within the last couple weeks since our last episode. June 1st, there was a political leadership school in Cedar Falls that nearly 50 people showed up to.
Yeah, that was quite surprising.
It was a full one-day political leadership school. Kirk Shelley, with the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership, came up from Oklahoma to deliver the training. And there was actually a simultaneous, the exact same training going on in Wisconsin with a different instructor, so very popular school, and we hope to be able to bring this to every district in Iowa. Yeah, this happened to be in the first district, the first opportunity we've had to organize this school, so hopefully that same school will be organized and hosted around the state here in the coming months. And this past weekend, Campaign for Liberty had a social event here in Grimes, which was a lot of fun. We played some Constitution Jeopardy with our host, Alex Seliquini.
Nah.
And Constitution Quest, which I'm not sure how I would describe that or what sort of game I would compare that to. Kind of a
Trivial Pursuit, the Constitution version.
Right.
I mean, you get your tokens, you go around the board, there's some special spots.
Answer some, trivia questions. And I think it was probably more of a kid's game because, at least from my perspective, all the answers seem to be ridiculously easy. But
that's just Dusty's way of saying that's why I won.
But still, it was a good time all in all. So thank you for everyone that attended.
And congratulations to you and Brian for winning Constitution Jeopardy.
Right, and all of the winners for the games that we played on Saturday won a luxurious trip to Greenfield, Iowa.
Yeah, where we can go and visit the newly painted Freedom Rock.
That's right. I haven't been past it this year, but I've got family in that area, so I drive by on a regular basis. And Ray Bubba Sorensen.
Yep.
Bubba.
And I forget how big this rock is or just how much it might weigh if you could actually pick it up and measure that. But he repaints this rock about a mile south of I-80 at the Greenfield exit. And he repaints it every year. One year he just decided, after having seen Saving Private Ryan, he was inspired by it. And instead of just graffitiing this rock, he was going to paint a thank you message to veterans on one side. And every year thereafter, he has repainted the entire rock, not just one face of it. So it's a multifaceted rock, and he's got different scenes and pictures painted all over it. And he's been doing this, ever since.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. I never knew about that.
Yep, I visited a couple times. I got my name in the registry there just for the hell of it. But yeah, it's worth the visit. If you're on I-80 and you're coming from, say, Omaha or something, coming back to Des Moines, you may as well take a stop. Check it out.
Yeah, he repaints it every in time for Memorial Day every year. So, if you haven't been there this year, since Memorial Day, it's brand new. I mean, you can't just go there once. You've got to go there on an annual basis and see it all over again.
Yeah, which is nice.
All right, well, for our final announcement, Ben Swan, who you might know for his work with Reality Check, is an investigative journalist known for his unbiased, fair, and impartial reporting on United States politics. He started a Kickstarter program to get his new grassroots project, the Truth in Media Project or campaign, funded. We at Voices of Reason support this program completely and will contribute all of the profits from our Voices of Reason Second Amendment t-shirt sales to the Truth in Media Kickstarter. So if you would like to purchase one of those t-shirts and also make a contribution to the Truth in Media Kickstarter program, visit our website at www.voicesofreason.org.
That's going to take us right into the quote of the day, and today's comes from a Steve Jansen, who says, "Something to ponder today. Why does the government insist on taxing everything in the country except for broadcast TV?" I mean, shoot.
You can't be taxing our propaganda.
Oh, but the funny thing is that they tax every other form of propaganda, so why not that one?
My response to that on Facebook, we pulled it from Facebook, was that so people don't start putting scrutiny upon the relationship between government and television, because most of our viewers would agree, or listeners would agree, that there's a direct combination of what the White House wants you to hear and the next day's talking points on all news media, especially in the mainstream media.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at Syria. It was all above. We were talking about it, and then, McCain goes out, wanders lost in the desert for a little bit, and before you know it, now nobody's talking about anything. Distraction.
We were talking about the fiscal mess earlier, and wondering just exactly what the state of the fiscal situation is in the country since March, when it was last in the news, and again, nothing.
Yeah, all you hear is this random, horror story about the sequester affecting some, public school or some military installation. They couldn't turn the lights on in the building or something. It's just occasionally here and there a little snippet to justify that it's still going.
Yep.
We're still out of money. We're bankrupt. Or, I mean, no, they would never say we're bankrupt, but it's terrible. We have to borrow more money so we can function as a society.
Everybody seems to be distracted by something recently.
I'm not sure what that would be, but
the surveillance state. But we'll be getting into that. But for now, let's go ahead and break to our first commercial. And when we come back, we'll hit the lightning round.
And to those of you that have left the party, we want to earn your trust again. We're going to be a Republican Party that people will want to join.
But first, we have to get the grassroots at the same height
and control them.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Any another chair? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion reconsidered.
The ayes have it.
It's unfair to us. We sat here and objected. He said, are there any objections? We objected. And it's like, why even ask the question at that point?
Maine got screwed of half their delegates, more than half actually. That's why their governor's not here today, because he said he wouldn't come down unless their delegates got seated. Half of them got taken away, and they were replaced by people that the Republican Party, the RNC paid.
Keep mowing the grassroots down and see what happens.
This fight's not over. Help us defend liberty at voicesofreason.org. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, it's time for...
The Voices of Reason Lightning Round!
Okay, starting off the world-famous lightning round, this comes to us from the BostonGlobe.com. It is titled, Police Response Training Planned, but Bombs Hit First. The scenario had been carefully planned. A terrorist group prepared to hurt vast numbers of people around Boston would leave backpacks filled with explosives at Faneuil Hall, the Seaport District, and in other towns, spreading waves of panic and fear. Detectives would have to catch the culprits. Months of painstaking planning had gone into the exercise dubbed Operation Urban Shield, meant to train dozens of detectives in the greater Boston area to work together to thwart a terrorist threat. The hypothetical terrorist group was even given a name, Free America Citizens, a homegrown cadre of militiamen whose logo would be a metal skull wearing an Uncle Sam hat and a furious expression, according to a copy of the plans obtained by the Boston Globe. The real thing happened before we were able to execute, said a law enforcement official with a direct knowledge of the planned exercise. We've already been tested. This would have been the third year for Urban Shield, a 24-hour federally funded training exercise meant to test the response of police and other public safety personnel in large-scale emergency such as toxic spills or natural disasters. For this year's training, this is in reference to the Boston bombing, just so you know. This was on the exact same day as the Boston bombing. For this year's training, the agencies wanted to test the investigative skills of their detectives as well as their ability to work with detectives in other cities and share intelligence, said the official, who spoke on condition of anonymity because the details of the planned exercise were confidential. The training, funded by a $200,000 Homeland Security grant, will probably be rescheduled to early next year, said Transit Police Chief Paul McMillan, whose agency was slated to participate. He said he anticipates a new training scenario will be similar to the one already planned. Why wouldn't we do it? Just because we've had one event doesn't mean that we might not have another one, and it behooves us to continually work together to investigate these types of incidents. Officials from a dozen agencies had been meeting for months to plan the scenario. They behaved much like movie producers recruiting students from Northeastern University and the Boston Police Academy to play the parts of terrorists and witnesses.
You mean like actors?
Yeah. They scouted warehouses and homes around Chelsea and Winthrop that could be used as a terrorist safe house. In the training scenario, investigators participating in Urban Shield would have to track down footage of the bombers caught by street surveillance cameras and the phones of, quote, witnesses. They would have to call on intelligence analysts to figure out which terrorist cells might be threatening the city. In the scenario, the terrorists would flee police in stolen cars. They would dump the car in cities outside of Boston, which would compel detectives from different jurisdictions to cooperate and share intelligence. One major clue would have been the body of one of the terrorists found near a stolen car, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There were also false leads to keep investigators guessing. We'd have detectives running ragged, the official said. The main goal of this was to arrest as many of the people as possible and absolutely identify where the cache of bombs was being kept. Fiandaka, the police spokeswoman, declined to say what new training might look like. We can't talk about what we're doing for emergency preparedness, she said. People who participate in this don't even know what the scenario is going to be. So I think things that need to be mentioned here is this right here.
Well, for one thing, I mean, can you believe that they actually want to go and call this this fake, for the scenario, the fake terrorist cell, the Free American Citizens Unit or group?
That's a slap in the face.
I mean, this whole article...
Anybody who wants liberty must be a terrorist, right, according to law enforcement.
This whole article reads like a play-by-play from Boston.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, well,
it does. Even with the self-inflicted wound.
Of the actual event, not the training.
The stolen car, fleeing the city, dumping it, and then having a dead body, like where the police found him and supposedly his brother ran him over or something.
And then which dead body? The first guy that was identified as the terrorist, or the other two brothers?
Oh, I'm not sure. Or the one that was found in the river.
And the worst thing about it, they're like,
right,
we can't discuss what's going on. It doesn't matter. This preparedness obviously doesn't work. There you were with everything in place, and you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, and listen to this. I want to know if they were going to do this during the Boston bombing and the Boston Marathon and everything. They say here, Quote, the main goal of this was to arrest as many of the people as possible and absolutely identify where the cache of bombs was being kept. Unquote.
Yeah, hence little martial law.
So, I mean, were they just
scenario.
gonna arbitrarily arrest people unconnected to this this fake training exercise, and book them, get their fingerprints and iris scans,
and imprison them,
and put them in, take up a whole day of their time for this?
Force people out of their homes at gunpoint. Oh wait, we actually did that.
And the thing is, we had intelligence from Russia that actually told us about the Tsarov brothers and about them having spent time in Islamist extremist camps. And that they said time and time again, you need to keep an eye on these guys. You need to keep an eye on these guys.
Yeah.
And we've got all this stuff. They're wiretapping every single piece of information in the United States, on American citizens.
We're getting into that later, though.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
But I mean, the whole scenario was backpacks full of explosives laden around the city. During the Boston exercises, the third time they've done it. And it happens to have the exact scenario that they were training for. Like Tony said, they had every single agency involved with this. Department of Homeland Security, local police, detectives.
Dogs.
Bomb-sniffing dogs, FEMA, everybody in that area already. They were all freshly trained, getting ready for a training live exercise for this. And they all failed to find the actual people who carried out an actual attack at the exact same time, the exact day, the absolute best time any of those people should have been able to catch anything.
But again, the craziest thing of all, and I'm sorry, Dusty, I know you're about to say something, is the fact, what are the chances that they would be holding a drill exactly like the circumstances of the actual attack?
Just like in London, when they happened to be holding a training exercise on the day that the buses were bombed or the subways were bombed,
or just like in Newtown, when they were just having a training drill just about where a shooter was going into school.
Just like 20 miles down the road.
Or even on 9/11, where they had emergency drills going all over New York City that day.
And that was one of the things I was going to go into for both Boston and 9/11 was just, that article mentions the backpacks laden with explosives scattered all around the city. There was a number of what I will call false positives. Things that were reported. There was a backpack reported outside of the JFK Library.
Yeah, the Jefferson Library or whatever, right?
When you have both a real life event and a drill going on at the same time, it doubles the amount of confusion that's going on. Because on 9/11, there was 4 planes that were hijacked, but there were as many as 6 and maybe even more that were reported as being hijacked.
And you had mentioned actors,
right? And back to the radar screens, why that additional confusion? Because you had both a real world act and the drill going on at the same time, and people couldn't tell the difference.
And that's not conspiracy, that is fact. FEMA, they I don't know if it's FEMA or Homeland Security, but it probably would have been Homeland Security in 2001. But they all had emergency drills happening the exact same time, or within a few hours that they had started before or after events.
There's a huge list of exercises that were going on 9/11, and these are mostly annual exercises, annual events, but they don't normally all coincide on the exact same day.
Yeah, the chance of being able to plan something on a random terror attack, along with a emergency drill that kind of coincides with response to such an attack, one time is probably astronomical, trying to be able to guess that or randomly have them align. But multiple events over multiple years, it seems very, very, very unlikely, and the odds are probably even more astronomical than just one time.
Yeah, we can't tell you what we're going to be doing next because, well, then that would be giving it away that these are all false flag attacks.
Well, who knows? I mean, false flag or not, but you can't sit there and say, oh, it's exactly how it happened. There's too much coincidence to not be asking questions about it at the very least.
Yep,
exactly.
It makes you wonder if the Christopher Dorn thing wasn't anything more than a litmus test to see how people would respond to us using drones to hunt down and execute
that was
fugitives.
The cop out in California that went off the deep end.
Yep.
Right.
which they burned his house down. They were caught on the radio saying,
yeah.
"Burn it down! Burn him alive! Who's in there? We're not sure, but we think it is. Burn it!
Get the gas."
Yeah, but that totally wasn't planned
Yeah.
or intentional.
All right.
All right, moving on. Our next story takes us to lovely Alabama and to Alabama.com, where state officials comment on St. Clair Bibb County mouth swabs and blood sample roadblocks. From Pell City, Alabama, state and federal officials are commenting about the nature of roadblocks that took place this weekend in St. Clair and Bibb counties, collecting blood samples and mouth swabs. Jose Uckles, a spokesman for the National Traffic Highway Safety Administration, said the survey did not collect DNA, but those taking the information asked for a breath sample, an oral fluid sample, and a blood sample, from which you can get DNA from all of those sources, I do believe. In Alabama, those giving samples were paid $50 for blood samples and $10 for mouth swabs. Participation is voluntary, Uckles said. All data is anonymous. The samples, Uckles said, were used to measure whether drivers had the presence of over-the-counter, prescription, and illegal drugs in their systems, or alcohol and the driver's individual blood alcohol content or concentration. The survey used deputies to stop traffic, he said, for traffic safety. Quote, if you're doing roadblocks and asking people to stop, you have to have the deputies there to make sure everything is safe, he said. It's not about detaining anybody because the survey is voluntary and anonymous. It's about making sure the traffic is safe in that area. Doesn't that make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside that they're keeping us safe?
That's even more disgusting to me than those firearm buyback programs, which are just as bad. But, I mean, they say on conditions of anonymity. Well, I mean, come on. As soon as you get up there, I mean, they've got your license plate. They just pulled you over. They're probably going to ask for your ID and driver's license right off the bat.
Right.
I mean, because, well, they pulled you over. Why not?
Well, why did they have to set up roadblocks to do it? I mean, why couldn't they have had an advertisement in the newspaper or someone standing on the side of the road with a sign saying, hey, we need volunteers, $60 for standard blood test or mouth swab?
Yeah, why wouldn't you do this at a local health clinic?
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to get it of anonymous data of drivers on the road, I understand that a roadblock might be a way of doing that, but that seems a little. You're using the police to basically trap people into a private company's survey or study, and you know, it may have been voluntary or not, but you're still using taxpayers' dime to pay these police to help a private entity do a study.
Yeah, and to find out whether or not there were OTC prescriptions in people. If they're OTC, what's the problem?
They have a prescription.
You know?
Most likely.
I mean, it just seems like a conflict of interest. But it also seems like conditioning for people to get used to even more stops.
That's exactly what it sounds
like. Seeing how people react to getting your mouth swabbed and your DNA taken, which the Supreme Court just ruled that they can so conveniently do without a warrant.
I was just gonna say. I mean, that just came out from the court, and unfortunately, so many people who are charged but never ever convicted are going to be caught up in that kind of a system.
Yeah, and that's not conspiracy. That's straight from the Supreme Court. They just ruled that laws and police officers can do that.
The judicial system is screwed up beyond belief. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Eric Holder is the most reprehensible person in the face of this Constitution.
And I still can't even believe that guy is still in that job. I mean, we were talking about removing him when Fast and Furious first broke.
Yeah.
And he's...
How in the world did he... I mean, they called, you know, what is he, the Teflon Attorney General?
The Teflon Don from Chicago or something.
Man,
I don't know.
I'll tell you. Because he's too important to the administration. I mean, he
knows where all the bodies are buried.
That's
apparently.
for sure. And when he's done, trust me, you're not going to know what happened to him. But anyway,
who knows? Moving on. Let's move on. Keep moving here.
All right. Well, to go on our theme here, next article comes from New York Times. Obama calls surveillance programs legal and limited. By Peter Baker and David Sanger.
Limited?
Yeah.
It's kind of like they redefine the word imminent. They redefine the word limited.
There you go. All right, Washington. President Obama offered a robust defense of newly revealed surveillance programs on Friday as more classified secrets spilled into public complicating a summit meeting with China's new president focused partly on human rights and cybersecurity. Mr. Obama departed from his script at a healthcare event in California to try to reassure Americans that he had not abused government authority by collecting telephone call logs and foreigners' email messages. But the disclosure hours later of secret contingency planning to target other countries for possible cyber attacks made his get-together with President Xi Jinping later in the day all the more awkward because cyber attacks by the Chinese are high on the American agenda.
I'm going to stop you right there for a second. I was watching Jimmy Fallon last night, and that topic came up during their summit. And Jimmy Fallon says that President Obama asked the Chinese to stop spying on Americans, and the Chinese president said, "Okay, you first."
It's not even funny.
It is
sad.
The latest of 3 documents published over 3 days by the British newspaper The Guardian added to the understanding of the Obama administration's approach to national security in an age of multifaceted threats and became another factor in the renewed debate over the balance of privacy and security. The identity of the person who gave those documents to The Guardian and The Washington Post isn't known, but the Post has described its source as a career intelligence officer angry at what he believes to be a gross intrusion on privacy by the Obama administration. Once a critic of President George W. Bush's hawkish policies, Mr. Obama was ready with an explanation for why he has preserved and even extended some of them when a reporter asked him at the healthcare event if he could assure Americans that the government was not building a database of their personal information. Mr. Obama said, "Nobody's listening to your telephone calls. That's not what this program's about." But he argued that modest encroachments on privacy were worth us doing to protect the country. He said that Congress and the courts had authorized those programs. A national security agency telephone surveillance program collects phone numbers and the duration of calls, not the content, he said. An internet surveillance program targets foreigners living abroad, not Americans, he added. There are some trade-offs involved. I came with a healthy skepticism about these programs. My team evaluated them. We scrubbed them thoroughly. In the end, he concluded that they help us prevent terrorist attacks. But the disclosures united liberal Democrats and libertarian Republicans in accusing him of abandoning values he once espoused. We believe the large-scale collection of this information by the government has a very significant impact on Americans' privacy, whether senior government officials recognize that fact or not. Senators Ron Wyden of Oregon and Mark Udall of Colorado, both Democrats, wrote in a joint response to the president's remarks. I'm going to stop right here. Basically, what we have is a president who's basically saying that what we are doing does not affect American citizens. What we are doing does not fly in the face of the Constitution, which is an absolute dishonesty.
Everything's okay because the president said so.
Oh, because Congress and the judicial system said it was okay. Well,
even though we put a gag order on them and didn't allow them to talk about this.
What Obama doesn't tell you is that he's not briefing all of Congress. He's not briefing all of the Senate. He might brief the leadership. He might brief a handful of committees. He's not reading in the entire body of the Senate or the entire House of Representatives. So he's counting a few members on both hands as an informed Congress.
I mean, and regardless of what Congress says, regardless of what the Supreme Court says, until there's a constitutional convention and something changes in the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment strictly says that without due process, it's illegal search and seizure of data, of information. And, Rand Paul tried to defend that when they changed the electronic communications. You remember what that one was called? You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
And nearly 2/3 of Congress actually voted against his amendment, which would basically keep emails off limits.
I mean,
the Electronic Wireless Communications Act or something like that?
Yes, exactly.
And, thank you.
The idea, and Rand's about to propose this again, but the idea that you would have to introduce a law to bolster the Fourth Amendment or any other amendment, that you would have to pass a law to enforce what is supposed to be the bedrock of all of the laws that we write, is completely asinine and backwards.
Or pass a law to reinforce the Constitution.
Right. I mean...
Well, because the Constitution is the inviolable law of the land.
Right. It's the supreme law of the land, unless the laws written in furtherance of the Constitution are unconstitutional, and then they're null and void and have no effect. But every law that we pass should be in furtherance and in accordance with what is already written in the Constitution.
So my question is, We're getting off subject.
Actually, we are getting on subject, but
Well,
we should probably go and break for commercial. When we come back, we are going to discuss the surveillance state in full. We're going to go back a couple months. Actually, we're going to go back about 6 months ago. And
even farther than that.
Even farther than that. But
we'll save it for the next segment here.
We'll take you down the rabbit hole.
That's right. And the question will be, will you take the blue pill?
Or the red?
Hold on to your butts. It's going to be a trip.
We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Gabe Lands, and I'm the acting director of Iowa Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of currently serving military, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help us God. Our oath is to the Constitution, not to the politicians, and we will not obey unconstitutional and thus illegal and immoral orders, such as orders to disarm the American people or to place them under martial law and deprive them of their ancient right to jury trial. We Oath Keepers have drawn a line in the sand. We will not just follow orders. If this sounds like you, I invite you to check us out on our website, oathkeepers.org, or you can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/oathkeepersia.
The name of that song was Stay Away, which is exactly what we'd like to tell our government to do right now. Instead, they seem to be almost in bed with us, listening to your phone calls, checking your emails. Of course, they're not actually reading or listening to any of this stuff. They're just storing it in their new $1.2 billion massive data facility out in Bluffsdale, Utah.
No kidding. And they're actually going to be building another data center right here in Iowa, actually. There was talk about it. I think it's for Microsoft, though.
Well,
or Facebook, actually.
Microsoft has one that they were working on in West Des Moines. Facebook's doing one in Altoona. But there's a third one that's coming to Iowa.
Wow.
But we're not talking about the same sort of surveillance, except that Microsoft and Facebook are all allowing the government to snoop through their data.
That's right. Just today, I actually contacted somebody from InMotion Hosting who hosts our web server for Voices of Reason, asking them, do they give away any information to the government, especially as regards to emails or any other data held on the server? And their response was, we never, ever give away any information as explicitly detailed in our terms of service. So I went and found the terms of service. And, of course, what does it say? Except when excluded by laws or exempted by certain criteria. And it's just like, okay, so there's their loophole.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are concerned that all of these internet companies have given some sort of backdoor access or permissions. But as we've seen from William Binney, a former NSA employee and whistleblower, they don't need direct access to it. All they need to do is act as a filter. All they need is a pass-through. William Binney left the NSA, I believe, in 2004. And we talked about this guy back in December. And he was saying then that everyone in the U.S. is under virtual surveillance. One of the things that he talked about was a device that is effectively wiretapping or tapping into the phone calls or the switching stations for AT&T or Verizon or whoever is at this particular switching station in San Francisco. I'm sure there's one on each coast. And he said that based on where you place that device, where you place that filter, would determine whether you are filtering or collecting data on every single call that passes through, whether it be domestic or international, or whether you are simply focused on international calls. I mean, basically, the idea is that we are collecting so much data that we can't possibly sift through it all. So why not, from his perspective, why not focus on the international calls, the international data, so that we can identify the terrorists? I mean, isn't that what we're after? And, of course, they said no.
Well, yeah, but more and more, we're basically learning that it's not to counterterrorism. It's to counter political dissidents.
Well,
Exactly.
And it doesn't make sense to monitor the people in the United States to try and find terrorists. It makes sense to monitor, especially if they say they're only monitoring foreign terrorists, right? So what sense does it make to monitor people in America in such a dragnet when you could monitor all incoming calls and trace the phone numbers that all those calls are going to, and compare that with potential terrorist lists or log numbers of potential terrorists in other cities, and try and combine them that way and kind of greatly reduce the amount of data being collected altogether and have it be a lot more specific to your actual intended result, unless your intended result is to actually spy and collect data on everybody for some sort of nefarious purpose.
Right, and what Benny said back when he was interviewed and discussing what the NSA was doing is they're mirroring every piece of data that goes through these fiber optic lines. So let's just say that you have 10,000 gigabits per second going through a line. Well, it's copying exactly every single little bit of that data stream onto drives into the zettabytes. I'll have to come back and look that one up. But, I mean, if you think about it, all they have to do is record every single little piece of data ever and then run a query through a filter through all that data. They have the computers, they have the processing power to do it. And then they can just find anything on anybody at any point in time ever.
Just recently, there were multiple surveillance scandals that broke out of Washington. We were all left hanging with the Verizon story. I'm a Verizon customer, and not really having much in the way of options to try to get away from Verizon and go with some other company that isn't also, engaged in the same thing. But, we learned last week that Verizon is allowing the government to snoop. I mean, it's done under a secret court order that happened to be released. But then we found out today from Dianne Feinstein and is it James Clapper or William Clapper? I forget the guy's name. He's the director of national intelligence. But they said that we've been eavesdropping on calls for 7 years, and that this secret court order for Verizon was simply the 3-month renewal. It's a routine renewal. And they've known about this for 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years this has been going on. And yet, wasn't it just last year that Feinstein denied that any American citizens' emails or phone calls or anything was being recorded?
14 times.
She denied it 14 times.
The national security chief, or I forget who it was, is on record 14 times denying any information that's being collected on American citizens. And just for quick informational purposes, a zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes.
Wow. And then the multiple zettabytes.
1 trillion gigabytes.
And if you haven't listened to our episodes way back when we talked about how much is $1 trillion and how easy it would be to make a line of $1 bills to the moon and back.
It was like almost 3 times, to the sun.
To the sun and back.
To the sun and back. It was almost 2 or 3 times like that. It was absolutely astronomical distance that could be covered by it.
So 1 trillion billion bytes.
And that's just what they're letting people know that they have. I'm sure there's many, many, many more zettabytes worth of capability, because if they're downloading millions of calls worth of data a day in all internet traffic, I mean, in the United States, 300 million people using the internet a day has got to create tons of information, digital information, useless or not. So, I mean, I think they could fill, as crazy as it sounds, 1 trillion gigabytes worth of data probably fairly quickly.
Especially when you're surveilling the top 50 internet companies in the country. And this is where the next scandal came from. A little-known NSA analyst, I think he worked for the NSA and the CIA both, a kid that doesn't even have a high school diploma, a guy that was making $122,000 a year working for Booz Allen Hamilton, also a little-known company that started from nothing, but made their way on the backs of you, the taxpayer, working nothing but government contracts, and now how many billion-dollar company a year. This guy, having worked for Booz Allen Hamilton for like 3 months, decided that he couldn't stand working for a company and working in a country and for a government that was spying on everybody. I mean, he said he had the power to wiretap judges, Supreme Court justices, and even the president himself if he was given an email address to do it with. So he contacted a couple journalists, one from The Guardian in the UK and another from the Washington Post, and delivered secret slides on a program known as PRISM, and how they were collecting all of this information from, first it was revealed as the top 9 internet companies, the Apples, Microsoft, Googles of the world. Well, then you find out as more and more of this comes out, well, hell, it's 50 of the top internet companies.
I'm sure it's more than that even as well.
Probably.
I can't even name 50 of the top online companies, but
basically what we're looking at is probably something close to 99%.
Well, I mean, because it's probably companies, but then it probably doesn't even have to be companies that use the internet like Google and things like that. It's probably going to go down to internet service providers and actual instead of just content providers. It's going to be the actual,
such as right here in Iowa, CenturyLink, for example.
Yeah, like the actual
media
the infrastructure. Because what better way, like we were talking earlier, to gather all the information that you want than get it where all the information is bottlenecked. Then you can just put your little Brian's device or whatever it is that they called it, and put it right on the incoming lines. And
the Neris.
Neris, was that what it was called?
That was the device at the switching station in San Francisco. But
where did I get the Brian's device from? Anyways,
if you're a discriminating customer, and all of these companies are doing the exact same thing, where do you go? What do you do?
Create your own company. John Galt. Who is John Galt?
Who is John Galt?
Welcome to the John Galt High Speed Internet Company.
Well, to go on and tell us more about Snowden.
I was just going to get into Snowden. He left. He was working in Hawaii for Booz Allen Hamilton, and he left Hawaii on May 20th and went to Hong Kong. I'm not sure why he picked Hong Kong of all places, because Hong Kong, unfortunately for him, has an extradition treaty with the U.S.
Well, they're trying. I know I've heard them talk about this, but Hong Kong and China apparently are having some sort of internal disputes as far as cooperation between the governments of like the city and the actual country of China itself.
Sure, because this extradition treaty with Hong Kong was signed in 96 or 7, like a year before Hong Kong was returned to Chinese control from the British. And so, as part of that deal, Hong Kong was supposed to have yet another 50 years of, semi-autonomy from China as they were slowly reintegrated into the Chinese mainland. Well, of course, China doesn't want to give this guy back because he's apparently a super smart computer sleuth who didn't even need a college degree or high school diploma to get a job working for the CIA.
And he's got intimate knowledge of the inner workings of data facilities and places like that, and working knowledge of the software that they use.
And why wouldn't any young genius not want to work for the NSA?
So why do you think I should work for the National Security Agency?
Well, you'd be working on the cutting edge. You'd be exposed to the kind of technology that you wouldn't see anywhere else because we've classified it. Superstring theory, chaos math, advanced algorithms.
Code breaking.
Well, that's one aspect of what we do.
Oh, come on. I mean, that is what you do. You guys handle 80% of the intelligence workload. You're 7 times the size of the CIA.
We don't like to brag about that, Will. But you're exactly right. So the way I see it, the question isn't, why should you work for the NSA? The question is, why shouldn't you?
Why shouldn't I work for the NSA? It's a tough one. But I'll take a shot. Say I'm working at the NSA and somebody puts a code on my desk, something no one else can break. Maybe I take a shot at it, maybe I break it. And I'm real happy with myself because I did my job well. But maybe that code was the location of some rebel army in North Africa or the Middle East. And once they have that location, they bomb the village where the rebels are hiding. 1,500 people that I never met, never had no problem with, get killed. Now the politicians are saying, oh, send in the Marines to secure the area because they don't give a shit. It won't be their kid over there getting shot, just like it wasn't them when their number got called, because they were all pulling a tour in the National Guard. It'll be some kid from Southie over there taking shrapnel in the ass. He comes back to find that the plant he used to work at got exported to the country he just got back from, and the guy who put the shrapnel in his ass got his old job, because he'll work for 15 cents a day and no bathroom breaks. Meanwhile, he realizes the only reason he was over there in the first place was so that we could install a government that would sell us oil at a good price. And of course, the oil companies use a little skirmish over there to scare up domestic oil prices. A cute little ancillary benefit for them, but it ain't helping my buddy at $2.50 a gallon. They're taking their sweet time bringing the oil back, of course. Maybe they even took the liberty of hiring an alcoholic skipper who likes to drink martinis and fucking play slalom with the icebergs. It ain't too long till he hits one, spills the oil, and kills all the sea life in the North Atlantic. So now my buddy's out of work, he can't afford to drive, so he's walking to the fucking job interviews, which sucks because the shrapnel in his ass is giving him chronic hemorrhoids, and meanwhile he's starving because every time he tries to get a bite to eat, the only blue plate special they're serving is North Atlantic scrod with Quaker steak. So what did I think? I'm holding out for something better. I figure, fuck it, while I'm at it, why not just shoot my buddy? Take his job, give it to his sworn enemy, hike up gas prices, bomb a village, club a baby seal, hit the hash pipe, and join the National Guard. I could be elected president.
And that was from, in case you didn't know, Good Will Hunting.
Back in 97.
97. Things haven't changed much.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
That was supposed to be a movie script, not a playbook for the future.
Well, in that's case, then
that's what they've said about the book 1984 by George Orwell.
I was about to get into that.
And yet I was reading yesterday that sales of that book are up well over 100%.
Oh yeah, Amazon I've heard is like selling out in multiple different places and multiple vendors. Like they can't keep it on the shelf right now.
I've got a copy of it in my garage.
It's a good thing I bought my copy a few months back.
I got it sitting right next to my copy of Brave New World, Atlas Shrugged. I've got a whole boatload of books all in the same genre.
I should probably buy a copy of it because who knows, before too long it'll probably be illegal to have it.
Mm-hmm. Actually, what was that Ray Bradbury book that about the burning of books? Fahrenheit 451. Yeah. I've got that book up there too. I read that at the same time. Good stuff. But anyway, to get back on track, Edward Snowden.
I was trying to come up with the conversation we had, off the record during that clip, and we were talking about the number of people with top secret clearance. And I just read yesterday or today that there are 1.4 million U.S. citizens working for the government or for government contractors who have top secret clearance. And over 400,000 of those were people who worked for government contractors.
Yeah, that was something I've been thinking about today. Not necessarily the numbers, but just, he worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, a private government contracting agency that's been around for a while, apparently. I mean, it's the first I've ever heard of them, but I know there's an alphabet soup of government contractors in every form of function possible.
Oh, yeah. And I was living in the midst of it from Alexandria, Virginia.
Right. And I'm just wondering, how comfortable should Americans be that private contracting agencies or private companies have access and are collaborating with the NSA, CIA, FBI, DHS, whatever else, take your choice of agency, and having access to these systems that can literally wiretap, track, and locate anybody. I mean, yes, I understand that a private company might have more incentive to keep the overhead low and do things more efficiently than government could. But at the same time, if this is a government-built and sponsored program and ran by the government and leased out to private contractors, where is the accountability to the public of these contracting agencies?
Well, I mean, first off, I got to put out there that I prefer that private companies are doing this rather than just strictly government employees. But on the second hand, if we were to actually follow the Constitution, we wouldn't run into this problem of people having access to this kind of information in the first place. And that's where the problem lies. It really doesn't have much to do with the fact that it's a private company that's contracting out to the government. But yeah, I mean, like what Dusty said, 1.34 million people with top secret clearance.
1.4.
1.4 million? Yeah, give or take 60,000, 600,000. We got a problem.
So what are those?
We got a problem with the size of government is what we got.
What are the 400,000 private contractors with top secret clearances doing? I mean, 400,000. That's more than the entire population of Des Moines.
And to think that we're only getting one whistleblower every 6 months coming out to go and talk about the violations that are happening.
Not even 6 months.
I expect that more and more will come out, hopefully.
Yeah, and here's the scary part. Not to delve too far into the deep end, but there's a reporter from the Canada Free Press that has a DHS insider, and I've read multiple articles from this source, and he just keeps feeding us with more and more information. And this insider tells this reporter that if anyone thinks that what's going on right now with all of the surveillance of American citizens is to fight some sort of foreign enemy, they're delusional. If people think that this quote-unquote scandal can't get any worse, it will, hour by hour, day by day. This has the ability to bring down our national leadership, the administration, and other senior elected officials working in collusion with this administration, both Republicans and Democrats. The present administration is going after leakers, media sources, anyone and everyone who is even suspected of betrayal. That's what they call it, betrayal. This administration considers anyone telling the truth about Benghazi, the IRS, you name the issue, betrayal. He says that the administration is actually collecting names of sources, whistleblowers, and their families, names of media sources, and everybody they talk to and have talked to, and they already have a huge list. If you're not working for MSNBC or CNN, you're probably on that list. If you are a website owner with a brisk readership and a conservative bent, you're on that list. It's a political dissident list, not an enemy list, or not an enemy threat list. And so the reporter asked him, well, what's that exactly mean, being on that list? It means that there will be censorship under the color of authority of anyone in the U.S. who is attempting to expose what's going on in our name. It's about controlling any damning information from reaching epidemic proportions.
And imagine everything that you've liked on Facebook, them being able to, the government being able to filter on those likes. Let's see anybody. We'll just go ahead and give everything a value on our political dissidence table. Okay, what's this? Tea Party of Iowa. Boom, there's 10. Oh, Campaign for Liberty. Boom, there's 10. Oh, conservative group. Boom, 10. I like Reagan. 10.
Yeah, I tried to create a Facebook ad over the weekend because somebody told me that you could create an ad based on someone else's likes. So you could target your ad at a specific group. Say that somebody liked Justin Amash or Ron Paul or Rand Paul or whoever. Pick your target audience.
Oh, you said Paul. Boom, 10.
Right.
I'm telling you.
Well, and who's to say that they don't already have this power? Because if they can siphon everything that's coming in or being done on the internet, what's to make us think that they don't have the ability to do the exact opposite and stop information from flowing?
Well, they could.
Or handpicking.
I mean, I'm sure that they have the ability. I mean, that would take some serious processing power, though. That would be real time.
Well, not really. Just put an algorithm into your Nair device or whatever it's called. I forget.
The Naris?
The Naris device. Put an algorithm in there that takes any keywords or signatures of voices.
Well, that's what China does.
And
the Great Firewall of China.
Yeah, they identify it before it gets distributed to the routers and the nodes and everything like that, and then it just stops it right there and sends it off into a cache somewhere, and it never goes any further. But I mean, okay, so what we have here is the government has the ability to, just a recap, has the ability to log all of your phone calls. And they say they're only gathering metadata. So basically your phone number and the other phone numbers that you've called from your device.
And the call length.
The length of that call, supposedly.
But that there's store in the entire call.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. They say that's only what they're reviewing. But I guarantee, and you'd be pretty naive to think that they don't have the actual voice recording of that call, a small kilobyte file logged somewhere. It'd be, if they're already getting the other information, the call data in your voice conversation is already part of that file, more than likely. So they're logging all your phone calls to everyone you've gone to. They're all of the digital transmissions from your phone to the cell phone towers, to your cell phone companies like Verizon. So all your 4G data, 3G data, GPS data, everything, your positions that you've been to, your Google searches from your phone, your phone calls, your games you play, what times of the day you play them, they can figure out patterns off of that.
Your GPS location information.
Yeah, and then couple that with what we've talked about before.
With trapwire, facial recognition.
With trapwire, the facial recognition.
RFID on license plates.
Yeah, or the police driving around with the cameras in their cars that take pictures of license plate and log them with GPS coordinates so they can get a map of where you go all the time.
Iris scanners at public schools.
Yep, that was just recently news. We didn't talk about that. I don't remember, but talk about light poles at bus stops that record your conversations and they have microphones in them. And it just keeps on going. Or how about one thing I found here? It was an article from RT back in March that I believe we covered. DHS drones are equipped to eavesdrop on American citizens, and I know they're using these in Afghanistan. They have drones from 20,000 feet in the air, however high they're operating. They can intercept cell phone communications and eavesdrop on that actual telephone call. They can use the GPS data and all the metadata from it that they want. They can sniff the air and figure out if there's bombs or chemicals in the air and analyze it. They can fire missiles from the drones at the same time. So if you're looking at this, they have a full spectrum of things that we know about, not including technologies or hardware or capabilities that are still secret and that no one's talked about or leaked yet. They can basically get you from every angle that you would possibly use with an electronic device. From your computer at home, the cell phone in your pocket, computer at work. They can track you on the air, your phone. I mean, your even cars now. Cars have links to Pandora and wireless services now with GPS, things like that. OnStar.
Sure.
You can get information delivered to the screens on your phone. You can log appointments to dealerships from your car screens and things like that. So, I mean,
just imagine how many front-facing cameras are on cell phones these days, and as you put your fingerprint right there on the screen, you don't think that that's taking a digital imprint of your fingerprint? I mean, it could.
I'm sure it can.
Of course, and then they can match it to your face. Oh, wait, is that your eye? Oh, brrr.
Yeah.
Fingerprint, eye, scan, all at once.
I mean, it's pretty.
And then all you got to do is drive down to Alabama and stop at a roadblock and you give them a little DNA sample, too.
Yeah, and so
$50.
That's the last thing they have to do is just get your physical biometric data on hand. And then what's left for them to be able to know about you? I mean, if you've ever served in the military, they already have your social security number, your address. They know everything that ever happened to you in there. They have your fingerprints.
And they don't need drones to have the complete visual on you. I mean, we can use infrared, ultraviolet, microwave radiation, anything that they want to go and see us moving right now. Recording studio here at
satellite
Chez Seliquini.
They can use satellites to observe areas or take pictures and even live video streams. I mean, it's just mind-boggling the capabilities if they could coordinate it well enough, which most government agencies aren't very capable of that I know of, to coordinate that many different facets.
Well, the problem is that the bigger the lie, the harder it is to remember what the truth is and what's not. And now the Obama administration's getting caught up in the whole entire tangled weave of it all, the tangled web of it all. And just like that article you were talking about earlier from the Canada Free Press, talking about the DHS agent who was giving up information, saying that this is getting out of control. It's enough to bring down the administration. Well, it's amazing. It's kind of ironic that the CIA's motto is "The truth shall set you free."
Well, I'm wondering if that insider story was maybe Edward Eric Snowden, or what's his name?
Edward.
It's not Snowden.
It's not Snowden, but
I mean this guy's inside the Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting if they were collaborating or something, because even Snowden has let on that I have more information to release. So he was on Twitter or something and said, save some melodrama for later because you're going to need it. So I'm just wondering, maybe they're working together. Probably not, but
that was actually the reporter from The Guardian that said that.
Oh, that was Greenwald?
Yep.
Okay, never mind. But even still, I'm sure we know him and Snowden have been working together, so I'm sure he has some idea of what's coming.
And they're actually trying to castigate some of these reporters or Snowden himself as, of all things, Ron Paul supporters or libertarians or oh my God,
Yeah.
He donated to the Ron Paul campaign. We know that. Charge him for treason.
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to take this conversation. I mean, we could bring Bradley Manning into this discussion as well. You know, I just want
Julian Assange or Kim.com.
Yeah, I just want to ask our listeners out there to, you know, comment on our Facebook page or send us some email, comments at voicesofreason.org, and give us your opinion. Is Edward Snowden did he commit treason? Is he guilty of treason? Is he guilty of espionage? Is he a criminal? Or did he actually do something to expose the criminal wrongdoing of our government? Is Bradley Manning a criminal? He's already admitted guilt to some of the charges against him, but in revealing war crimes, is he not in fact a whistleblower, or should he be convicted of treason?
And why is it okay for the government to prosecute companies and businesses for not, you know, for them taking action against whistleblowers against them, when whistleblowers against the government basically wrapped up and thrown in prison immediately?
Yep.
Well, according to Lindsey Graham, you don't get a lawyer.
No.
Well, you know,
we go straight to Guantanamo Bay.
In Rand Paul's world, people don't have protection against terrorism. Well, in Lindsey Graham's world, well, it looks a lot like Stalin's world.
Well, and you know,
that's what he said anyway.
My personal opinion about Mr. Snowden, I think he's kind of like a modern day hero. And as Ron Paul said, you know, Obama should send him a thank you note because we're finally getting the administration transparency Obama always promised.
And you know what? As Benny had said way back when, he goes, and you may as well go and let the NSA know how you feel about them because they're going to read your email.
Yeah, and you know, I don't see what Snowden did as treason nearly anywhere near the same ballpark as I would consider the actions of John McCain on Memorial Day, going and chatting it up and collaborating with the Syrian Al-Qaeda rebels. I would consider that much more of a treasonous offense worthy of going to Gitmo than releasing information about the government's overreach and destruction of the Constitution.
And if you don't think that the information that suddenly surfaced from General Petraeus, if you don't think that was related to somehow all the data mining that they've been doing.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the blackmail potential with having all of this data, all of this information. I mean, they're going to do something with it. They're going to charge you with a crime. They're going to blackmail you.
Well, just
that's the only way they were able to get Obamacare passed.
I saw an article. It was on InfoWars, but it made a very good point that they went back to the 2012 Obamacare decision, where, you know, if someone like Edward Snowden has the ability to pick his target and find all the data available on him, all the way back to 2001 when they started collecting phone call information, and then it's just expanded since then. If he can go back and take his pick, why wouldn't it be unreasonable to say that somebody within the agency that or sympathetic to the Obama administration would pick out Supreme Court Justice Roberts, who was one of the last few people to release his decision on the Obamacare mandate, and use it to blackmail him to sway his decision? Because, you know, everyone thought for sure he was going to come out and say it was unconstitutional. Then out of nowhere, last second, he changes his mind, and then all of a sudden he won't budge. Very, very uncharacteristic for someone like him, you know, supposedly. I don't know much about the guy, but reading a lot about him in other articles, it seems like it was kind of a shock attack to most people. And that kind of really got me thinking. I was like, well, if they could do that, just think what else they could do with the ability to blackmail anybody. Any
politician, any judge, any citizen,
any CEO of any giant corporation, or anybody on the New York Stock Exchange, any government contracting agency. You know, the list could go on and on and on. And if somebody's not doing what you want them to, you just call up your buddy at the NSA and say, hey, this guy's not cooperating with me. I need you to put some pressure on him to get him to do what I need him to do. Otherwise, you know, it could be bad. And then there you go. You got people you could have potential manipulation of the stock market more than it already is, which I didn't think was possible. You got influencing elections or politicians to either drop out, run, or support legislation. Whatever you can think of, it's possible with this. And it goes to The Dark Knight, the movie The Dark Knight, where Batman is trying to find the Joker, and he taps everybody's phones, right, and turns them into a microphone, trying to find where the Joker's located. And he eventually finds him, but then he destroys it at the end, right, because it was too, as is the black dude who's like the defense guy who creates everything, he said it was too much power for one person to have. Well, the ability of the government combined with everything else they have is too great of power to be put in humans' hands, because humans are fallible and it will be abused. And it's too great of an outcome and too much power for anybody to yield, and it has too great of consequences. It needs to be destroyed.
And we've seen this play out before. One of the things that I've seen talked about in passing is references to the Church Committee during the 1970s. And this was a House or Senate committee that was investigating the Nixonian White House Watergate abuses, was investigating NSA abuses, and this is where a lot of the controls came down on the NSA to make sure that everything that they were doing made sure to exclude Americans from the equation. And for a long, long time, according to some of the books on the NSA that I've read by James Banford, he's written 3 different books on them, and every one of those books talks about all of the rigorous restrictions on how they collect and what they collect to make sure that Americans are excluded from the picture. And yet we are repeating all of the same abuses that the Church Committee addressed in the 70s.
It is pretty interesting. I mean, Gabe, you mentioned The Dark Knight, and a lot of times you got to admit, a lot of what we see on television ends up just simply being something to kind of, to condition us to get used to a certain idea. It's programming. I mean, stay tuned for your regularly scheduled programming. But now we've got all these dark movies coming out. We Person of Interest, the series out there talking about a surveillance state, basically operated by. They try to make it seem a little bit more, something you can deal with because it's not in the hands of the government. Well, it is, but it's also in the hands of 2 people that are trying to fight the government. But in the end, ultimately, it's kind of getting people used to the idea. Now, you never know. I mean, now we've got a couple White House movies where the White House is getting attacked. You got Olympus Fallen,
White House Down,
and White House Down. I mean, what is this? Are these is this stuff supposed to get us used to something that's about to happen? I mean, I know last episode we talked about how it seems like the pieces are falling into place for a new world war, but yeah.
And it's all of this surveillance doesn't have just Americans concerned. It also has people around the globe concerned. Because the third component of these surveillance scandals that came out was information on the program called Boundless Informant. And basically that is the analytics or the analysis of all of the data collection that's going on around the globe. I mean, there's one big reason why we have the United Nations located on U.S. soil in New York City. I mean, don't think that we're not spying on every diplomatic outfit that's housed at the United Nations.
Well,
friend or foe.
If they're using the internet, we're intercepting everything that they do.
And even if they're using their own
or their cell
private
phones.
Lines, I mean, it's obvious we've got ways to.
They still have to use our towers.
Intercept it.
I mean,
if it's wireless, yes, but most of that stuff is closed channel cable. They've got their own protocol going underneath the Atlantic and all that good stuff.
I'm sure it's all secured. We've never done anything to intercept that stuff.
Yeah, because for a long time, U.S. companies have known about all of the graft and the bribery that goes on and trying to get contracts around the globe. Well, how do they have that information? How do they know that France is bolstering some of their aerospace companies if the government's not snooping around the globe and providing them that information so that they can use it against them?
And since when you're being recorded, the only answer is misinformation, which is why I just want to let everybody know right now that I've decided to become a Democrat, and I'm a big supporter of Obama.
Obama phone.
Obama phone. I can't even say it.
Yeah, while we're talking about Obama, I think one of the funniest stories that came up in our political leadership class was our instructor. His son was trying to win at Halloween. He was trying to gauge he was trying to figure out a way to get the most candy. because it was going to be his last year going out trick-or-treating, so he wanted to go out with a bang. So how can I get the most candy? What can I possibly do? He went in Oklahoma as an Obama supporter, and he wore this shirt that said Hope and a big picture of Obama and whatever. And this worked two ways. He'd show up and knock on a door, and a Republican would come to the door and see his costume. And he'd explain to him, this is the scariest costume I could think of. And he'd get tons and tons of candy. Then he'd go knock on another door. Democrat would come to the door. Well, I didn't think there were any Democrats around here. Have some candy. And this kid just cleaned house.
That's funny.
Gets everybody to like him.
Wow. Come to find out he's a libertarian. I just kidding.
He's a capitalist at heart.
Ultimately, yeah. Man, that's a pretty funny one, Dusty.
So, I mean, what do we take away from this? I mean...
Well, the first thing that I take away from this is voices of reason is always right. 2,
if you wait long enough, I mean, everything that we talk about seems to come to fruition.
Yeah, but
in one form or another.
What I'm gonna do actually this week is on our Voices of Reason Facebook page, which you guys can access at www.facebook.com/tastetheliberty. I'm gonna go ahead and compile all of the articles and all the discussion points that we've talked about in the last 37 episodes that either the media has stopped talking about and was unresolved, or 2, something that we predicted and ended up happening. And it's usually about 3 or 4 months afterward. So, should be interesting. I honestly, I'm afraid to think about what's going to happen in 4 months from now.
Well, I mean, if you look at the last episode, we were talking about World War III, and then now we find out all this surveillance and snooping on us here in America. We can only assume that the snooping being done overseas is much more egregious because we don't have to worry about their constitutional rights, right?
And it's going to be right around the end of September, and that's always when the shit happens.
And so, you know, we're already pissing off the rest of the world, invading all these other countries and forcing them to come into armed conflicts that they don't want to have anything to do with. And, you know, we're basically trying to force our will on everybody else. Eventually, people are going to get pissed off, and it's going to bite us in the butt. And I really hope it doesn't come stateside.
I'm not even sure if we have to wait until September.
No, we don't.
Unless the park police in D.C. can keep Kokesh locked up that long.
Do you guys have any predictions on what maybe Snowden will release next? Any guesses as to what maybe he has?
Well, I'm not sure that he released.
What would be really interesting is that if he had access to recordings of the president himself, that would incriminate him, and if that was released, that
would be kind of awesome. But you know, Snowden released 40 slides on the prison program, and I cannot find the entire slide packet because it's secret, it's classified, and most of the media outlets chose not to release the whole thing. He was really hoping that they would just dump the whole thing, and so am I. What else did he release? He released the secret court orders on Verizon. That came directly from Snowden. That came in advance of him coming out and publicly identifying himself or making himself a target. But what else is there? I mean,
well,
this is going to get a lot more interesting.
I'm kind of excited because I'm sure it's going to name names as far as companies that are actively involved in complicit in this, even possibly helping develop the system.
One of the questions that we were discussing earlier was the companies that are involved in allowing the government to siphon or filter off this information. What congressmen or senators have financial interest in all these companies?
It's kind of like what you were talking about with the Iowa Capitol earlier.
Yeah, there's a big story about the Iowa Capitol and how it was built and how it started. You know, it seems that after they laid the cornerstone, that all of these people that were elected as legislators in the first session suddenly went into the contracting business, and they spent millions and millions of dollars and didn't build a Capitol.
And
but they sure signed that stuff together.
A good idea would probably be monitoring financial accounts and tradings of congressmen right now, and what companies they're bailing out of, trying to figure out.
That's another thing.
If scrutiny is going to be coming down upon the the companies they have stock in for through this Snowden leak.
And making that information public and putting it someplace like, say the internet, like the Stock Act did, until they, secretly, suspiciously stripped all of that stuff without anybody even knowing about it, including our own Congressman Steve King.
Well, here's the thing. When you've got all these different companies, and I understand Gabe's concern, but you've got other people that are having access to this stuff. Who's to say that there aren't copies? There aren't copies of all this data, all these personal records floating around there. Everybody's got their own personal copy, and I'm not saying that everybody's going to have the ability the resources to go and, keep a database full of zettabytes. Obviously, they're not. However, who knows what is out there? I mean, all it takes is a name and an interesting phone conversation, and you have blackmail potential. I mean, there's not a single person out here who's not guilty of doing something, or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, or just making a mistake.
We've already heard about phone calls that were being intercepted between service members overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan and their loved ones here at home, and NSA people that listened in on the phone call. No, we're not listening to your phone calls, but yes, we listened to the entire phone call, and we felt guilty because we were listening to one American overseas talk to another American back home.
Yeah. And, it's just like it goes back to blackmail. Just think what they could do to influence governors of states to support legislation going through, or with the Obama health exchanges, or just things like that. Anything.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, if the government's doing it, who's to say that other governments aren't also doing it to us? Who's to say that regular old Joes aren't doing this? I mean, if there's an Eris device out there, somebody made it.
Yeah, who designed it? Well, and not only that, but we know that some of the records have already been shared overseas with the European government or something like that. I don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah.
But we know that some of it's already been shared overseas with other governments and entities. So it's like, what do they have, and what are we allowing them to do on our soil?
Very true, and we already know that the IRS doesn't have the best reputation for having the highest standard and best character of people. Just imagine how easy it would be for one of them to go and throw in a device to go and intercept all the data that go into the IRS. Tax returns alone, all your information is going right through that to them, and anybody who's ever submitted a tax return electronically, imagine the kind of identity theft that could go on.
They already have all that, because everything that's ever been submitted electronically through the internet, all your PayPal purchases.
Well, I'm saying that any person at the IRS could be intercepting all this information easily.
Possibly, yeah.
Right there.
Because
that information right there, everything is useful. If they were involved in something.
The realization came to me when all this stuff started breaking. We had a revolution in this country for less than what is going on today. We have a longer train of abuses, and our program's probably gone a little long, so we don't even have time to read them all.
No, actually, it was funny because Gabe was going through a binder full of about 30 episodes worth of printed articles that we discussed, and just what's in there alone.
I just said
you said that.
I said it's literally enough to incite a revolution.
It is, and yet here we are. I mean, yes, we're doing something about it. We're talking about it. We're pissed off. We're trying to get everyone else, to wake up and realize what's going on.
And the reaction from people out there, we expected it. It's no big deal.
Yeah, or they got to know what they're doing. Well, we know people are doing that because we saw it themselves. So what if the president said right now that you're a threat and that you should be killed? I'm sure he has his reasons.
Yeah, what was that? Over the NDAA, right?
Yeah. National Defense Authorization Act. But there's more to it than that. And unfortunately, guys...
And then couple the NDAA on top of all this. The ability to kill, capture, and disappear, quote, disappear, like Mr. Snowden said, anybody, Americans on American soil. I mean, they have enough information to destroy your identity, your finances. They can freeze your financial accounts. They've had that ability for a long time. But all your electronic communications. And now... I mean, there's nothing that they can't do. They don't have the ability to do now.
And we talked earlier about Obama's initial misgivings about some of these programs and how he'd been reassured. And there was a great internet meme or picture going around with quotes from Obama from 2007 talking, railing against these programs and this kind of eavesdropping, and then coming out in support of it. And basically the crux of the picture was Mr. Obama has won the war over himself.
He loves Big Brother. That's a quote from
1984. Mm-hmm.
He won the war over himself. He loved Big Brother or something like that. I just saw that. Well, I don't know. It's heavy. It's heavy, mind-blowing stuff, but it's kind of exciting because who knows? Maybe this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back in America, to where people will start caring about power in the hands of government officials, and maybe it will be a catalyst to freaking finally rein in some of the abuses and the technology that the government has that they shouldn't, like the ability to eavesdrop on everybody at once. I mean, it should be destroyed. The power that they can wield with it is too great, and it is too the consequences of being able to use that to do whatever they want is just it's too bad and too unsure of its outcome. It needs to be destroyed.
There's a few things that we have to do, but one of the things that this country really needs is a free and impartial press. And as most people know, the press is not free anymore. I don't know what is anymore, actually. But that's why I want to remind everybody, check out Ben Swan's campaign, Truth in Media. And if you can, buy one of our T-shirts. You can find that on our website. That's www.voicesofreason.org. There's a tab in the top right. It's called Store. Click that, and you'll get all the details. But all the profit that is made, all the net on these T-shirts is going to go toward that Kickstarter program. We've got a surplus of shirts here. We just would like to get them out and then have that money go toward a great cause. And we can't think of a more important thing these days than a free press.
And on that note, I think that about wraps it up for this program.
But you will find our live feed on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tastetheliberty. You can find videos posted on YouTube at
youtube.com/tastetheliberty.
And follow us on Twitter at Taste the Liberty.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Catch you later.